Welcome to the Compliance 911 Show, a no-nonsense podcast discussing hot topics for today's busy compliance professional. It's everything you wanted to know about regulatory compliance, but we're afraid to ask. And now, here are your hosts, Dean Stockford of M&M Consulting and Len Suzio of GeoData Vision.
Len, if my records are correct, next month we will have recorded our 100th podcast. So what interesting topic did you plan on discussing today?
Well, Dean, we are recording today's podcast on June 25th, 2025. 1 week ago, the CFPB announced its 2025 Section 1071 Interim Final Rule, which succeeds its 2024 Interim Final Rule, which succeeds the 2023 Final Rule. Only in the world of the federal bureaucracy can a final rule not be a final rule, and an interim final rule itself not be an interim final rule. But be that as it may, I thought it would be an appropriate topic today, especially in light of the Bureau's announcement that it will accept comments about the new 2025 interim Section 1071 rule if received on or before July 18th. So time is of the essence.
Well, the Section 1071 rule will affect not only banks, but also credit unions and commercial lenders that originate the 100 small business loans threshold for 2 consecutive years. And it's been estimated that Section 1071 will affect about 2,000 or so, or greater than 2,000 lenders. So the rule's impact is widespread and far-reaching, and I'm certain this podcast may spark the interest of many lenders who are not subject to the federal CRA, which is at this time is limited to only just banks.
Well, I agree with you, Dean, and this is going to be a much more complex topic than usual because the 2023 CRA rule also will be repealed, and an NPR related to that rule is expected to be issued shortly. But as of today's recording, that NPR has not been published. Making things even more complicated is the fact that the loan data collected under Section 1071 is intended to eventually replace the loan data reported under the Community Reinvestment Act. But let's proceed to address 2 important issues raised by the Section 1071 interim notice of rule. First, the 2025 interim rule applies to any potential covered lender, not just lenders who were included in the stays by the 3 courts in which litigation regarding the 2023 Section 1071 rule had been initiated. This has been an ongoing question, and the answer is now clear. It's not restricted. This proposal is not restricted only to the lenders who participated in the litigation. Second, the major point of the NPR is to postpone the compliance dates in the 2024 interim final rule and thereby provide time for the CFPB to revise the 2023 Section 1071 rule. Effectively, the NPR proposes delays of the 2024 compliance dates by about 1 year. When I say compliance dates, I'm referring to the inception of the collection of the required data and then the reporting of that data. For Tier 1 lenders, in other words, lenders who had 2,500 or more small business loans originated for each of 2 consecutive calendar years, the current data collection commencement date of July 18th, 2025 will be postponed to July 1st, 2026. Note that not only is the date postponed, but the new compliance dates all begin at the first of a month, not in the middle of a calendar month as required in the 2024 interim final rule. Also, the first reporting date will be June 1st, 2027, not June 1st, 2026. For Tier 2 lenders, and there was those who originated at least 500 small business loans in 2 consecutive years, but fewer than 2,500 such loans, the new compliance data collection date is now January 1st, 2027, not January 16th, 2026. The first reporting date will be June 1st, 2028. And finally, for Tier 3 lenders, those who originated 100 or more small business loans in 2 consecutive years, the new data collection compliance date will be October 1st, 2027, and the first reporting date will be June 1st, 2028.
So, Len, I know when this first came out, there was all kinds of confusion because of the definition of small business. So when you say small business loan originations, what defines a small business loan?
Hey, Dean, a small business loan is a loan to a business with $5 million or less gross annual revenue under Section 1071. This is substantially different from the current CRA definition, which includes loans of $1 million or less, without regard to the size of the business borrower measured by gross annual revenue. This can cause much confusion, and it also presents a challenge to lenders since most lenders have never compiled lending activity based on the size of the borrower. Moreover, as I'll mention later on in this podcast, it looks like the way things are scheduled right now, that many lenders will be required to report small business loans under Section 1071, as I just said, defined under 1071, but simultaneously continue reporting the CRA small business loans with the entirely different definition. Talk about potential confusion.
Yeah. Well, it seems like the die has cast for sure, and the changes will be made to the 1071 rule. And although the NPR does allow for comments to be submitted, to me, it seems like there's nothing a lender can do. Is that correct?
Well, I can understand that as a natural reaction, but I would suggest that lenders should submit comments about several concerns in the specifics of the proposed 2025 Interim Final Rule regarding Section 1071. In addition, it may be a good time to make some suggestions for the Bureau to consider as it formulates a new NPR for Section 1071 to be published sometime later.
Yeah, that's surprising and interesting too, Len. And I'd like you to explain further with our listeners, but it hasn't the comment period, or is there a comment period, or has it expired already?
No, the comment period will expire on July 18th. So basically as we're recording, it's about 3+ weeks to go by the time this is broadcast, which I think we'll have to start next week in light of the timeliness. There'll be only about 18 days to submit comments. And again, as I'm going to explain right now, there's very good reason for bankers not to sit back and just let things happen, but to submit comments. So first of all, regarding the amended data collection and reporting compliance dates, I would urge covered lenders to point out that commencing data collection for any date other than January 1st is wasteful and confusing. Why is it wasteful? It's wasteful because any data collected and reported for only part of a calendar year is not usable data for analysis. What's the point of Tier 1 lenders reporting data for only half of 2026? Or for Tier 3 lenders reporting lending for only 3 months of 2027? Partial year data will not be useful for analysis. It's an additional cost burden for useless data. Also, having the different tier lenders, I should say, commencing reporting over different years, in other words, June 1st, 2027, June 1st, 2028, means more confusing data that's not useful for analysis, since only some lenders will be reporting in each year, and each tier of lenders will be reporting activity for different parts of the previous year. On June 1st, 2028, the first reporting date in which all 3 tiers will report activity, Tiers 1 and 2 will be reporting lending activity for the entire 2027 year. But Tier 3, the tier with the most covered lenders, will report only 3 months of lending activity for 2027. So based on the proposed compliance dates, the first useful information that'll be reported is the activity for the year 2028 to be reported on June 1st, 2029.
Jeez.
Now, keep in mind that until the Section 1071 data is universally reported and useful, banks subject to the 2023 CRA rule or the legacy rule will be required to collect, quote, small business loans as defined in that rule, which is radically different from the Section 1071 definition of loans to small business as just mentioned a few minutes ago. This could be a source of much more confusion. It should be suggested to the Bureau that uniform data collection and data reporting dates when they commence should be applied to all covered lenders and that only full year data be reported. Based on the time frame in the NPR, it looks like data collection should commence for all covered lenders on January 1st, 2028, and data reporting to be submitted on June 1st, 2029. That would save a lot of costs for useless data and would make reported data useful as soon as it is first reported. This data collection and reporting schedule should be matched by a concomitant repeal of the small business lending data collected and reported under the CRA rule. This will avoid the additional work and costs and potential confusion caused by the simultaneous reporting of two different small business loan definitions under the Section 1071 rule and the CRA rule.
Wow, this is very eye-opening, and I want to say perhaps a little confusing at the same time when we're bouncing between the definitions and the two rules between 1071 and CRA, not to mention the fact that we have a potential repeal under CRA, and then, of course, this new NPR under 1071, and everybody thinking about what we just came off from over the last few years, getting ready for 1071 and CRA. So it's a little crazy. But do you have any more suggestions for our listeners as far as, submitting comments to the NPR?
Yes, although at the very least, I think lenders, particularly potential covered lenders under Section 1071, should primarily focus on the reporting dates and the data collection dates. I suggest that their comments go beyond that. It might be a good idea to submit comments related to the entirety of the 2023 Section 1071 rule. For example, one of the big objections to the 2023 rule was that the Bureau exceeded its statutory authority when it expanded the 13 statutory data points to 81 data points. If the Bureau receives many comments about that issue, it may increase the likelihood that the Bureau may trim the data points back to the original 13 points in the statute. Why wait till another NPR is produced? Let's try to influence what the regulators put in the eventual revised 2023 CRA rule. And other comments about the sequestering of the protected demographic information should also be suggested. That information is not available to the credit decision makers. It makes it more difficult to analyze, understand, and correct patterns of lending bias. The HMDA data does not require the isolation of demographic data for residential mortgage borrowers from lenders. So why should the Section 1071 data, protected demographic data, be treated any differently?
Yeah, and I tend to agree with you. And of course, HMDA is one of those regulatory areas that helps us identify red flags relative to discrimination. So it is. To me, it's mind-boggling, Len, for sure. But I think given our audience, given our experience, I should say, and what you've gone over today, I certainly think that you've given our audience some things to ponder for sure. And it's been very appreciative, especially for me. So I want to thank you for that. But this is Dean Stockford from M&M Consulting.
And this is Len Suzio of GeoData Vision saying, submit your comments to Section 1071 revised interim final rule so you can have an influence on the final outcome. We hope that you found today's discussion informative and helpful. Please let us know of any topics you would like us to address in future podcasts.
Thanks for listening to the Compliance 911 Show. If you like the podcast, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss an episode. While you're at it, please give us a like and review to help others find the show. As always, links are in the show notes, and you can always find us online at compliance911show.com. Follow M&M Consulting and GeoData Vision on LinkedIn for all the latest news and information on compliance hot topics.